But when we started out, I said to you that if you're going to become noted in today's marketplace, you have got to be remarkable, you've got to be relevant, and you've got to position yourself that you're personally beneficial. I want to tell you a story that impacted me for my entire life. And it's everything I ever learned about marketing, I learned when I was about 8 years old. And here's what happened. Every Saturday morning, I'd come running down my steps, bounding down the steps into the kitchen. My dad would be there about 9 o'clock in the morning. He'd be sipping on a cup of coffee, and he'd be reading the newspaper. I would run past my father, go right up to that refrigerator, and I'd grab my chore list off the refrigerator. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'd take my chore list over to my dad and say, "Here, Dad." And my dad would look at it and say, "Son, did you do all your chores?" I'd have my arms around his neck, and I'd look at him and say, "Yes, sir, I did." And with that, my dad would reach in his pocket, and he'd pull out 25 cents, my weekly allowance, and give it to me. Man, I'd give my dad a kiss on the cheek, run out the door, grab my bike, take off down to Jimmy Parsons' house, which was a block away. Jimmy would be there on his bike, having gone through the very similar experience, and we would ride the 2 blocks to Walgreens Drugstore. When we got to Walgreens Drugstore, we didn't rush in. We ran up to the glass door. He was on one side, I was on the other side, and we would stare through the glass door and just look. Because we needed to make sure that the little blonde-haired girl was behind the candy counter. As soon as Sally was there, we rushed in that door, and we'd run to the counter. And she would say, "Every week, can I help you?" And I would push a nickel across the counter, and I would say, "Jawbreakers." Little Sally would turn around, and she'd take a little canister of Jawbreakers off the counter, bring it back to the little candy counter, and she would scoop 1/4 pounds of Jawbreaker, weigh it out exactly on the scale. And then, when it weighed out exactly 1/4 pound, she would look at me, wink, and put her hand in that little glass container and pull out 1 more Jawbreaker and drop it in my bag. I got to tell you something. I didn't know anything about pricing, didn't know anything about packaging, didn't know anything about competition, but I knew Sally was special. And everybody in my world knew Sally. Kids that had never gone to the drugstore knew, wait till the little blonde-haired girl is behind the counter, because she is remarkable. I never did know Sally's last name, but I tell you this, we nicknamed her. And her name went through our entire school system, was always go to Walgreens and wait till you see Jawbreaker Sally. My challenge to you is do something that remarkabilizes you. That's your ticket to increased production this year. Thank you very much. I'll see you. I got to turn this back over to Tom.